Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Ryan Heckman, the CEO of Rallyday Partners, and this is the Founders Journey podcast. We'll explore the heart and soul of great founders and their journey to build the company of their dreams. You will learn about new industries and business models while discovering how to apply the founder's mindset to your everyday work and life. Hello, I'm Ryan Heckman, the CEO of Rallyday Partners, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Founders Journey podcast. I'm not sure what we're going to call this series, but my guest, Kevin, is a longtime investment banking colleague, partner in crime, thought partner, going back over 20 years. Kevin and I have been talking about how cool would it be if we spent a little time with investment bankers from different sectors. One, to kind of demystify, investment banking as a thing, learn a little bit about what his firm, Provident Healthcare Partners, does so distinctly from other investment banks. And then Kevin has been focused on healthcare for over 24 years. So for those of you in the healthcare industry or otherwise, thought it would be cool if we did this each month, maybe a banker from different sectors. It might help all of us just learn a little bit new content about these spaces, particularly as we're in this era of change with AI and all this stuff. So Kevin, welcome to the Founders Journey podcast. Welcome to Denver. And I'm just really grateful that you've invested the last couple of days to spend time with our firm. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Ryan. And I really appreciate you all taking such good care of me over the last couple of days here in Denver, obviously enjoying the beautiful weather. And you guys have been terrific and looking forward to today's podcast.
Great. Why don't we start, Kevin, a little bit. Tell us about how cool Provident Healthcare Partners is in the world of investment banking, and maybe pretend we're all like, at your son or daughter's class where you're coming in to tell that class what you do for a living, and try not to make it sound that boring.
Oh my God, my daughter would be mortified if I ever did that, but I will do my best here, Ryan. So as Ryan mentioned, I've been with Provident in doing this for the entirety of my career. That's now 24 years in counting. Provident, what I would tell my daughter and her friends in the class is, I think the easiest way to describe what an investment banker does is we're the middleman. We are that broker in between someone who's looking to buy and someone who's looking to sell at its most simplistic level. And of course, Ryan, it's not quite that simple. I've been very fortunate to spend my entire career here at Provident. We were probably one of the first healthcare-focused investment banks to be founded. This is our 28th year as an independent, fiercely independent investment banking firm. We have 30 or so wonderful full-time employees between our two primary offices in Boston, which is where we got our start, and in New York City. I was, employee number 4 at the firm. And one thing that I think is really cool about Provident, when you think about our peers, is the longevity and tenure of our folks. I have been here 24 years. Believe it or not, I am not the longest tenured employee at Provident. There's actually 3 individuals that have been here longer than me, and one actually came in at the same year. So we have, developed, similar to Rallyday, we're very focused on our culture and taking care of the, men and women that work at our firm and being good stewards for, our partners and our clients in the healthcare world that we work with. And it's been a terrific run for myself in seeing people build and seeing the company grow significantly from, 4 or 5 people to where we're at today with 30 plus employees between 2 primary offices.
Yeah. You think about that arc, 25 years, and I just think about the healthcare industry and how much it has changed over those 25 years. And there's not many people that I know who have been on the front line of the consolidation and the private equitization of the healthcare services markets, generally speaking. I think back to when I started investing in healthcare company, it was probably in 2001. So similar number of years. And back then, nobody was doing it. And I remember the first healthcare company we bought, and it had a lot of Medicare. Medicare was like 80% of how this company got paid, which is actually not all that uncommon. In investment committee, we had one of the older guys said, "There's no way I'm buying a company with 80% customer concentration." And so instead of bidding 5 times, we bid 4.5 times EBITDA. It's because he was worried about the customer concentration of Medicare. But this just shows how primitive we all were at that time. It must be interesting to you now, Kevin, to be kind of an older statesman in your firm or elsewise, having seen the evolution of the space. Tell us about what that feels like.
Yeah, Ryan, I say this all the time. I'm blown away by the talent of the people that have been coming in that have joined the firm over the past few years and 10, 15 years. I always tell them I really wish there was a way for them to kind of go back in time and see how we actually got deals done in 2002 and 2003. I think primitive is a really good way to put it. There was no virtual data room. We were not working with, technology. And, I think we had BlackBerry pagers. It was really more of a, 8 to 5 type of job at that point in time. Now it is a 24-hour job. It is a 7-day-a-week job. There is no time off the clock. I would say vacation time and time off is very difficult because you're always working the deal. But back then it was a lot different for me, Ryan. Right when I came into the firm, one of my primary functions was developing our data list and our database at the time, which I couldn't even tell you what it's called. I'm sure somebody remembers what it was called back then. Obviously, we're on Salesforce today. We've gone through 3 or 4 different iterations, but my primary function was I came in there. It was a new firm. We had to figure out, all right, what do people want to buy? What are people doing in healthcare? We've got this firm. And it was as simple as I went upstairs. We had I think the ceiling was probably about 5 or 6 feet high. We had an old mailing machine, and I would go up there with a survey and I would blast it out to every healthcare company, private equity company at the time. Like you said, Ryan, it wasn't as prevalent. And I would say, please return this or fax it, if people know what a fax machine is, back to this number. And we would get the form back in and we would figure out, okay, we'd fill in our database. We have their information. We have their contact information. We know what kind of companies they want to buy. And we had a little box at the bottom, I remember, that said, if you're interested in selling your company, check this box. And believe it or not, that's how we got a lot of our deals in the early days. Is some people checked that box and it came back over. And it was like, we got one. And we would call them back. And at that point in time, we obviously were maybe not as selective in who we would take on. And, we got very lucky. We ended up starting in the healthcare world. Like you said, a lot of companies that were heavily reimbursed, and we still do to this day, heavily reimbursed by Medicare. I think that, we kind of, sowed our oats in sectors like durable medical equipment, infusion therapy, specialty pharmacy, disease management. We just built relationships. We got somehow, some way, I still don't know how, the 4, 5, 6 knuckleheads in State Street in Boston that were working there at the time figured out a way to get a few deals done, and deals built upon deals. And that's kind of how we did things back then. Due diligence was done in a conference room. It wasn't done over Zoom meetings or things like that. It was done in person. There wasn't the stringent third-party diligence that you see today on transactions where you have, 6 different third-party advisory firms coming in to help with all these different channels. But the evolution's been amazing. I still, to this point, like I said, I don't know how we got deals done back then. We got them done. We built our reputation. We built our brand, and I'm just incredibly proud of what we built and become to today.
Yeah, I mean, that brand and franchise value that you talk about is sort of embedded in how Kevin introduced his firm in terms of independence, number one, which is unique, and two, so specialized in one sector. And when you get the compounding effect of wisdom stacking upon wisdom, and over time, for those of us on the private equity side, when I kind of discover a new company, or I'm trying to get my mind around a sector that I don't know very much about, I can call Kevin or one of his colleagues and say, okay, here's a company I'm looking at. The Kevin on the other end at Provident Healthcare Partners might ask me a few diagnostic questions like you would when you go to a doctor, for example. And then in about 5 minutes, they can tell me this is good or bad or neutral, how much I should probably think about paying, what parts of that business would make me want to pay more versus less. And it's just amazing. These independent specialty firms like Provident, they can be really valuable to me as a private equity buyer, but also as a privately held healthcare company. If you want to know what you should be doing next year with your business that's going to drive a higher exit multiple when you or if you go to market, these guys will take those calls and give you the answers to the test before you waste a year or two chasing the wrong initiatives that take a lot of effort but don't do anything. And I bring that up with a little bit of tone because I just think there's a big difference between getting on AI and getting a bunch of knowledge about something that might be seemingly efficient versus calling a Kevin at Provident Healthcare Partners and getting that wisdom that was compounded for 25 years. It's so valuable.
Yeah, I think Ryan, you're exactly right. We are, one thing we do at our firm with the very talented professionals that work at Provident, as you grow up through the firm, you become an owner of a sector. And healthcare is, you can slice and dice healthcare into 200 different verticals if you wanted to. But if you called and said, I have a question on a behavioral healthcare business, I have a question on a physician practice business, a home healthcare business, it might be me, but if it's not me, within, a matter of a phone transfer, I can probably get you on the phone with someone that can do a very deep dive on that, explain the pros and cons of the sector. And that's a lot of what we do at Provident. A lot of, what we do is not just dialing and reaching out to people to sell their business. You have to develop relationships. You have to understand the priorities of the founders of these businesses and what they're looking to accomplish. We closed a wonderful transaction with you all last year, which we'll probably hit upon. But that was a process that took us many years of developing a relationship with a very talented CEO and guiding him to the point where we felt the time was right to, launch and take that deal to market. Because some deals just are not ready for prime time. And a lot of times people are just not at the point where they're ready to do something. We're very low pressure. I think one thing with Provident, great people that work there, terrific bedside manner. We understand developing a relationship that becomes a client. I think we've benchmarked that. It takes about 2.5 to 3 years. So you have to be patient and understand that, you need to provide a lot of consulting and guidance and make sure that, you help those, men and women that are building these companies or these private equity groups that are maybe have an idea about a market to best position themselves for either their sale or to help position, someone like Rallyday, if they're looking at a sector, to say, look, this is how you're going to be best positioned here. Here's what you're up against and here's what you really need to look for. We take a lot of pride in that. We provide a lot of education. We're subject matter experts. And I think that's probably what makes us incredibly unique in the broader spectrum of banking.
Yeah. So if you are a CEO or COO or CFO in the C-suite at a healthcare services business, pretty much of any kind, healthcare company of any kind, you might think you got to call McKinsey and have them produce a 75-page PowerPoint deck to help with this season's strategic planning process. And I don't think many CEOs and founders know that all they have to do is call Kevin or one of his partners, and they'll basically take those 75 slides down to like 10, and they will tell you, what you should be prioritizing in the coming year that's going to drive the most equity value creation. And there's no strings attached. And they're probably not going to charge you. And I just want to really encourage those that are listening to this podcast. Kevin, I guess they could contact you on LinkedIn, or tell folks how to get in touch with you. Like, what's the best way?
The best way is probably a lot of my connections from the business world are probably through LinkedIn. I have, lots of people I follow. I have lots of followers. I'm very active on LinkedIn. It's a good investment. And from my perspective, personally, I pay out of pocket just to get all the perks and those benefits of being able to connect with people. So that's the best way to reach me. And if you go to LinkedIn, you'll see my email address. And frankly, in this world, I would tell you that texting is not quite where email is, but I carry around whenever I'm in meetings, whenever I'm in the office, I have my iPad with me all the time because having a keyboard and being able to type with people that prefer using text is a very, very significant part of, how I communicate with people, whether it's clients, buyers, or anybody else that might be looking at doing something with us.
Okay. So full name, investment bank name, like all that stuff real quick, and then we'll jump to another topic.
Yep. So you could contact me. It's Provident Healthcare Partners. Our website is providenthp.com. And my email address is KP, my initials, at providenthp.com. And my direct line to reach out to me is 617-759-5297. And as I mentioned, feel free. That's a line that you can send text to as well.
All right. So that's I guess a good swing thought for folks that want to get a bit more wisdom about their industry. Okay, next topic. Tell us about healthcare. You probably have your own way of looking at it, but let's start with kind of services, which would be companies that, employ providers of some kind. whether they be physical therapists or dentists or doctors of varying kinds. Let's start in that sector, and then maybe we go to products or, but let's start there. What's going on in healthcare services right now? If you had to only distill it down to like 3 to 5 big things that is happening right now in those markets.
Yeah, so that market is probably our biggest area. That, provider services encompasses a lot of our work here at Provident. So that could be on the retail health side of things, where we would consider things like urgent care, dental, physical therapy, clinic-based models, multi-site healthcare, and then larger, more surgical-focused physician practice management groups, the ologies, I guess I would just call them, is where we spend a significant amount of our time at Provident. The biggest thing in that world, in my opinion, over the past 12 months has been the development and engagement from large GPOs, specifically
don't do these initial acronyms, Kevin.
Group purchasing organizations, but they're really the big pharmaceutical distributors. And the big three that own practically 100% of the market are Cardinal Health, McKesson, and Cencora, which used to be known as AmerisourceBergen. They have come into the market looking at physician practice models that have a high volume of drug spend. Oncology, urology, retina, and which encompasses eye care. Really, those are the big three. They have completely changed the dynamic for private equity-backed groups in that market. They are the buyer of choice. They are able to pay exorbitant valuations, and frankly have allowed a lot of private equity groups to have amazing exits on some of their portfolio companies because of their inclusion into the market. One constant in my entire career, as I look at dental and I look at some of the more retail models, it's been very consistent over my career. Dental has probably produced the largest number of private equity investments in the provider services category when you think about the multi-site healthcare model. In my career, it's been constant since the early 2000s. Rallyday, I know, is involved in this sector. It's been a great market. It's one that has been fairly consistent in terms of deal volume. Valuation has always been rather attractive in that space. Of course, there were some headwinds with COVID and wage increases. Those are some of the bigger pressures I think you've seen that may have dampened some of the activity in those markets in the past few years. But I think overall, with the wages kind of coming down, reimbursement kind of, tempering out, and those businesses that have heavier commercial reimbursement, they remain steady investments and, good places to put your money. And that's why groups like Rallyday and many, many other private equity groups over my career have backed, organizations and practices in those areas and have had very successful outcomes.
Yeah, one distinction we use here at Rallyday when we talk about provider models is just the difference between a referral demand go-to-market strategy, by which I mean, either a primary care doctor or some other professional source of demand that gets referred into the practice. That's kind of one world. And then another world is more, direct to consumer. Dental being kind of a poster child of that. Dermatology, maybe to a lesser extent, they probably have a nice mix between these two things. I think what's been interesting to me as a long-term healthcare investor is just, I am not awesome at consumer. I didn't grow up in retail businesses or, it's just not a consumer products business. It's just not something I've done a lot as a private equity executive. I have been surprised, in dentistry, how much of that business is dependent upon, advertising. I mean, traditional advertising, marketing, convincing new patients to come into the practice. In some ways, I feel like I let our docs down because I'm not awesome at that. We've now got a team that is awesome at that. But tell us about the difference between those two and how you guys look at that as a bank.
Yeah, I think you're right, Ryan. I think that there is this kind of line, and you call it consumer focused. We kind of call it the retail model, and you're absolutely right. I think we kind of bucket, and marketing spend is incredibly important when you think about groups in the dental practice management space, urgent care, dermatology to a lesser extent, and even a space that you and I have done a lot of work in, Ryan, historically, ophthalmology. One of the first deals we worked on, marketing was a huge piece of their budget. They were one of the key sponsors of the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, I remember that was a huge line item. Everybody was trying to get their head around on that deal. So yeah, I think from our perspective, we have some businesses in the ologies that are definitely more just, they're getting fed by referral sources. they're always going to be busy. Their schedules are, there's a shortage of physicians in those spaces. They're just always going to have full schedules. And that's a different model. They're not going to be as dependent on, marketing. Maybe someone in like orthopedic, I could see that. But generally speaking, those groups are just being fed by their referral sources in the local markets. But yes, the consumer side, the retail healthcare side is highly, highly dependent on a marketing strategy. It sounds like Rallyday is kind of done what we've seen other successful private equity firms do, which is they've kind of developed internal teams that focus on different functions. It might be human resources, it might be marketing, like you said, where they can kind of go out across their entire portfolio and have applicable things that they can bring, whether it's a healthcare company or a non-healthcare business. So yeah, I would say, Ryan, that's a key differentiator when we look at provider services. That's a good way to think about it. Differentiating between those groups that are really fed by the machine, by the referral sources, versus those that have a little bit of that, but that really are dependent on marketing and advertisement and outreach.
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of gotten to the point with provider businesses that look something like, as an owner, if I spend 50% of my time creating a really good employee and provider experience, that sort of translates into patient experience. And then the other 50% of my time, if I make sure I'm being a good steward on behalf of those providers to make sure that they always have, enough patients, that if I do those two things like really well, it's 80% chance I'm going to be successful as an owner. And they're so symbiotic because people take for granted that if you're a hotshot doctor, do you want to go to a company where, seeing new patients is rare and you're not busy and you're on your phone, during business hours? Or do you want to go to a place where it's jamming and you get to provide access to patients and impact more lives? And just by my tone, I think we know the answer to that question. But Kevin, give us a sense of like what I mean by that. It's like incredibly important.
Yes, I think especially in the retail side or the consumer side, Ryan, turnover is, one of the biggest issues there. It's less of an issue for us on some of those larger, referral driven provider specialties. But, turnover is incredibly important. I think groups have had to, develop ways not only to keep the physicians busy and happy, and by and large, everybody's a little different in provider groups. Some people will kind of go through the motions and they don't want to be overwhelmed, but most people like to be busy and engaged and excited to, do what they do every day with a full schedule and obviously, make a good living. What we've been finding in these models, much more so than in the early days, is that the retail models or the consumer models are coming up with different ways to, and this is something we talk with a lot of folks about. Physical therapy is a great example. Primary care is a great example, where historically those were businesses and provider models that were owned 100% by one individual, and that individual probably was passive and maybe not practicing or really providing patient care. We found a shift where models are being developed that some people call them JV models or other types of models, where they're getting some equity and getting some ownership into the hands of whether it's physical therapists, dentists, providers at primary care groups. Primary care is another market where a lot of times those are not those are not partnership models. It's usually ownership by a very tight group. So that's been something we have seen develop over the past 10 years. And it's something, as you think about a deal from the banker's perspective, what will make the transaction more attractive? I mean, if you're a private equity investor or a buyer of a business, and you're handing over $100 million to one individual, I'd be a little bit worried about, well, this person's going to get $100 million. And then, you've got all these providers that are going to somehow probably find out about it. Really creating alignment with your providers, whether it's economic equity, is critically, critically important. And I think that has been something in a lot of provider spaces for deals that maybe haven't been as successful. They didn't create that alignment, when they developed the platform, and it kind of down the road, it led to turnover, dissatisfaction, and maybe not the best outcome. So I think alignment is incredibly important in accomplishing all the things that you just talked about, Ryan.
Yeah, I would almost even use the word resentment. And the doctor ecosystem and the private equity ecosystem kind of reluctantly are partners now. And by the way, that participation of private equity into healthcare Kevin probably has better stats here, but I dare say when I started, it was somewhere between 0 and 3% of healthcare services companies were owned by a private equity owner of some kind. And now it kind of depends on the vertical, but it's somewhere between 30 to 50% of the healthcare that all of us consume every day is owned by private equity. And, the Wall Street Journal had an article about just the damnation of that reality. I can see both sides of this. I'm sympathetic, and the cynicism or the skepticism, being circumspect about private equity, like being part of the continuum of care for our loved ones, is just sort of scary. What's funny though is I think a lot of doctors are driven by the same incentives. It's not as glaring of a headline in our healthcare system here in the United States, but it's a real thing. And we're trying an experiment right now at 2 of our portfolio companies. I don't know if you know this, Kevin. We now have both our dental business and our physical therapy business. Every employee at the company is an owner. I met this fellow named Pete Stravis, who's at KKR. We were on a panel together. He's a really neat guy. KKR has been pretty vocal about the virtues of employee ownership. And here at Rallyday, of course, our purpose statement says we want to create the most value for the most people. We've just never had a company where all the employees were owners. And part of the reason we did that was this point you're raising, Kevin. What is your perspective on, how we should look at private equity owners and that relationship with doctors and how we can maximize that? And are you at all skeptical? You're a father and a husband and all this stuff. How do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's here to stay. Let's be honest. I think that the model has changed, and I talked about this earlier. I think that there have been models, Ryan, and I'd be lying to you. One area that we probably have not spent a lot of time in that others have heavily, heavily invested in is actually in pet care, in the veterinary space, which is healthcare. I will tell you, there have been some horror stories out there, and even locally in the Boston market where I live, some providers kind of going under in that space. And a lot of it is just poorly run by private equity groups. And maybe just private equity was throwing a lot of money at deals. And one thing we really take a close look at in our transactions is we look for thoughtful capital. And if we're doing a deal, I've always made this a rule, if we're doing a deal in a provider or physician market, unless you have a really good reason, there is no way I'm going to include a private equity investor that has never made an investment in a provider or physician group on a list of sponsors that we're going to go to. Just, Ryan, all the nuances of setting up a new platform in a provider or physician model. That is not for everyone, and I would not want to put our client at risk of having a bad outcome because they get into a situation with someone that's never done it before. So it is a reality of the world. Look, the other reality for a lot of physicians and why we're seeing a lot of these models developed is because groups are looking for an alternative to being scooped up by the health system. They do not want to be employed by the health system. We're doing a transaction right now that they're doing that deal for that exact reason. They are partnering with more of a strategic group, I'll just say, without giving away a name, that I think what we're finding is they don't want to join the health system. And I guess your other option, Ryan, is, you can join Optum. A lot of people don't like Optum, and Optum is the largest employer of physicians in the entire country right now. So those are options that do not resonate with a lot of people. Obviously, Optum is a publicly traded company under United Healthcare, and we've all seen kind of the issues they've had in the past couple of years. So if you're finding a partnership with thoughtful private equity and you're a physician, the incentives are obviously a lot of these deals provide a great monetary outcome that was not available to most physicians 10 or 15 years ago, if we're being honest, because these deals were not out there. They're seeing amazing returns on, their ownership. And maybe 15 years ago, their only option was, well, when I retire, I'll get to keep my accounts receivable. And that's probably about it. So now you're talking about generational wealth being created for them. But I do think on the flip side, the best deals we've worked on in the space are those in which, just like you guys, when you did your deal with us last year, you had a great founder CEO. I think the most successful physician deals are deals that continue to be led by physicians. I can think of many, many examples of the most successful deals having physician leadership and setting up guardrails and setting up things. So post-closing, if you're a physician and you're like, oh, great, I got my check, I don't want to be bothered. Like, I understand we have private equity, but as long as my day-to-day life is no different, I control my schedule, my vacation is still the same. You're not going to tell me how many patients I need to see. That is the norm on transactions today. They're much more thoughtful. There's many more conditions as part of these deals that I think protect the broader group. And I do think there's a lot more thoughtful capital out there that they're not just doing these deals to cut, staff and, bring in AI and make a few points on EBITDA. They're really coming in a very thoughtful manner and layering in new offerings, new product lines or ancillaries, whatever you'd like to call it. We're really seeing the results of that in our deals. So physicians are doing these deals, and it's not just the status quo. They're being presented with opportunities to expand their practice and, be able to do some things that they maybe weren't able to do before. And, there's other factors too. I mean, there's a lot of deals, as you know, Ryan, these physicians have, personal guarantees on their loans. Those kind of things can go away with private equity. So there's pros and cons. And I will tell you, Ryan, in this environment, if you talk to any physician, they will tell you that in 95% of their interviews with young men and women that they're bringing up or hoping to hire and recruit, they get asked about private equity. It is a reality. I think in some specialties, Ryan, I'd be shocked if it wasn't over 50% of the providers in the country weren't somehow, some way attached to private equity. And I would even bring in, corporate ownership now with some of these large groups that are getting into the space.
Yeah, I mean, the joke is that the only thing worse than a private equity guy is maybe someone at a big insurance company. Like from a doctor's perspective, the bar is not very high. Yeah, I mean, we could debate the public interest here for a long time. It's probably we're not gonna get that figured out on this podcast. But I do just want to give a shout out to Provident Healthcare Partners, because what you heard Kevin just say is, they've been in the space now for 28 years. I mean, they know, the composition and the characteristics of a buyer that is quote unquote thoughtful. I mean, when Kevin uses that word thoughtful, what he's saying is that when you do engage Provident Healthcare Partners, they're going to be really good at being picky on your behalf. If you're a current owner or a group of physicians, you won't even see the bad characters out there. And look, there's bad kinds of owners across any industry. It's not isolated to healthcare, but Provident Healthcare Partners has been doing this for so long. They know all the characters out there. And when they say, this firm is going to be a good partner, not just in the deal, but post-close and behalf of your patients and community, like, take it to the bank. That's a very qualified opinion. And it's just so cool how much Provident Healthcare Partners prioritizes that when they do a transaction. And it's very unique and very special. And on behalf of, I guess, all of our communities, Kevin, thank you for doing that work.
Yeah. I mean, part of the deal, part of the process is this is not just taking a company out to market and to the highest bidder goes the deal. Our job is to make sure the process is competitive and that we're doing due diligence on behalf of our client and providing them with a lot of guidance. And you've probably seen this in working with us. This isn't just a one-way street where the buyer gets to grill sellers and drag them into the ground with due diligence through closing. It's a two-way street, especially in deals that are partnerships, which is what groups like Rallyday are looking for. We really need our clients to be very well informed, ask the questions that are important, sooner than later in a process. And I think for physician groups, one thing I always tell physician groups is, especially groups that have a partnership model, I don't care if you're the 35-year-old that's, on his first year at the practice or the 70-year-old that's just waiting for the deal to close and probably retiring in a year. Your voice is just as important. And, our job here is to be your advocate. That means being available on the phone when you're available, which for physicians, as you can imagine, is either very, very early or very, very late. And if you're not comfortable in a group setting talking about certain things, then we have to make ourselves available to make sure you feel, good about the deal. And if you don't understand something too, sometimes, some people are shy. So that's part of our job. It's to, make sure we're not ultimately going to tell anybody who to do a deal with. You have options. And if we do a good job, you can go get with your spouse or with your partners or whoever that might be and make that decision on your own. And sometimes that decision might just be, you know what? We don't want to do a deal right now. And we got to take that risk when we work with someone, but we do have to be good stewards for them and make sure that they're as well informed about what they're walking into before they sign anything, certainly enter into exclusivity, or certainly close a deal.
Yeah, I do want to just share a couple things too about this whole thing. And when you decide to sell your business, you brought up the spouse, your partner, your loved ones, your children. I mean, it's just a big decision. It's a big fork in the road. One thing that I've always liked about you and admired about you, Kevin, is just, your integrity, your honesty, which people have different definitions of these words, but I think we all know what that means. Number two, great listener, and just the ability to ask questions as opposed to firing off answers. Like you ask great questions and you're a really good listener. I think third is that and we're going to find out why when we talk about your background, but you're very respectful and grateful for the opportunity to help people's heart and mind as they go through these deals. And I don't know how you quantify that, but I just know over the years working with Kevin and his team, I would add, but they have a big heart and they have a big mind, and they're very respectful about the entrepreneurial spirit and the legacy of the company and so forth and so on. That is very unique. And then the last one is just the wisdom thing that we talked about, just the compounding effect of being in these markets for this long across so many different companies and situations. Were you, Kevin, we're going to switch gears to some personal stuff a little bit here, but like when I rattle through those qualities, are those things that you were born with? And when you showed up, the number 4 employee at Provident, like that was Kevin? Or have you been on your own growth journey as an investment banker and those things were kind of chiseled into the masterpiece that they are by your experiences? I mean, how would you talk about those? And what influence would you give to your mom and dad, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, we'll talk about my background. I mean, I came up as a very, very blue collar background. Grew up, as I told you, Ryan, in what is famously known as the Witch City of Salem, Massachusetts. Went to public high school. Grew up in a family where on both sides, we didn't have anyone that attended college. So I was the first one. I'm the oldest. I'm the oldest of all of obviously my brothers. I have a brother and a sister, but all of the cousins on both sides. So I was the first one to kind of get to the point of college. Unlike my daughter, who is the same age as your son, who's a junior in high school right now, I didn't have all the great tools and resources that could be provided. So my process was pretty simple. I took a business course in high school my junior year, and I really enjoyed it. It kind of got into the basics of, I remember that's the first time I ever heard of EBITDA and some of these things that, we all know and work in right now. I said, business might be a cool place to spend my time. So I applied locally to New England to a handful of different schools, got into what was then known as Bentley College, now Bentley University, class of 2002. I loved my time at Bentley. It was a growing college and their reputation continues to grow. I'm very proud of being a graduate of Bentley. I learned a lot there at Bentley. And again, I think as I grew up through Bentley, I did the basic internships. I had a really bad one. I remember my sophomore year with a guy that was just the biggest jerk you could ever imagine working with. So that was a pretty bad experience. And then my junior year, Provident Healthcare Partners, which I think at the time they were known as First Healthcare Partners. But anyways, there was this opportunity, if you remember the old job, the website monster.com, and there was a sister company called JobTrack, and they had these listings that were only available for students at certain schools. I think it was like us and Northeastern and maybe Babson or a couple others. And I just saw this listing and said, looking for an internship, Provident Healthcare Partners. And I just picked up the phone. There's no resume. I just picked up the phone. I think it was Michael Patton who picked up the phone, who's still a colleague of mine.
He was the first relationship that I had at your firm.
Yeah.
Really
good
guy.
So I was like, I'm available. I was like, I'm a finance major at Bentley, and I'm looking for an internship. And I think I didn't do it as a summer. Like, it's much more structured now. Obviously, it's very competitive. But I just took a chance. I picked up the phone. I went in and interviewed. It was not at all the interview. I don't even think I'd make it in the door these days. And I'm not kidding with the talent that I see coming through. But at that point in time, it was a young, entrepreneurial, very, very small boutique investment bank that was growing and just getting off the ground. And I said, I'll start right away. I said, I don't need to wait till the summer. You need me this fall, or I think it was in maybe the spring or the winter. I said, I'll just start coming in. We got a shuttle that'll get me down to Harvard Square, and I'll take the red line into the city. And I just started interning at Provident and did the basics. I did data. I developed our database. I did the mailroom, like I said, and I just really enjoyed my time. They offered me a full-time job before my senior year. I vetted out opportunities in New York City, and I just bet on Provident. I just like the people, and I'm not a huge fan of New York City. No offense to those that might be from New York City, including our colleagues in the city. I liked working in Boston. I liked the people, and it was nice going into my senior year. I knew I had a job lined up and didn't have to worry about that. And that is how I grew. I never went back to get my MBA. Provident is my MBA. I grew on the job. I think what you said is perfect, Ryan. I think that's the most valuable thing I bring to a lot of the deals I work on is just that wisdom. I mean, I've been doing this for so long. There's things I can pick up on. I really, really do enjoy the people I work with. You've met some of them on the deals we've worked on. I realize their talent. I want to keep them around. They make me do a better job, and very, very grateful for the work they do. It's rewarding to see, especially some of the people that worked on our deal, Ryan, and on other deal teams, the guys that work, the women and men that work with me in Boston, just seeing them grow and develop their careers and their, just their business has been very, very rewarding. And I think we've been continued to just be a very, very fiercely independent bank. We're not owned by a big corporate bank. We're Provident Healthcare Partners. We are self-owned, self-sustaining. We work hard. We play hard. I think we take a lot of pride too in our culture. And investment banking, I will tell you, and you know this, Ryan, there are groups out there that will really just take on young 22, 23-year-old, 24-year-old men and women and grind them into the ground and work them on unrealistic deadlines and just create a bad culture. And that's why when we get a lot of resumes, I feel like sometimes we see people, I'm like, man, it seems like these kids stay there for a cup of coffee and just keep moving around. So we take pride in the fact that people stick with Provident. Some of them expand their wings and move on to like private equity, like a lot of people, but we're very proud of the tenure. And I'm proud of, the ability to have helped, hopefully in some shape or fashion, help these men and women develop, their skills and see them move up the ladder at the firm.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what a big compliment to you guys is that, we call it aggressive humility, which is this combination of being super aggressive and very humble at the same time. And there's not many people we meet out in the world who are both of these things at a 10 out of 10. And it's not just you. I mean, let's do a shout out to Jake right now. I mean, Jake is a rising star in your organization. He's been taking on more responsibilities. He drives a hard bargain. He pushed us around like crazy selling the business that we worked on together. But he also did it in a way where, everyone felt good. You could tell he was a steward of a win-win, not a zero-sum person.
That's right.
And I would like to just point out, I think you, Kevin, have had a lot to do with that. I mean, the role modeling that you've given. I don't know. Do you think your parents are proud of, do they understand enough about this stuff to know, the nobility of what you bring to an industry that, isn't really known for that?
Yeah.
And I ask it because I've had to defend my mom and dad, give me a lot of grief. And I tell them, no, we're the good guys, I promise. But like, how does that work? And your children, for that matter.
I'll be honest with you, Ryan. I think to this day, nobody in my family even knows what it is I do. I think some people just look at Provident Healthcare Partners and they think I'm in the insurance industry. I think I just try to, I think at this point, I would say this. I'm 85% sure my mother knows what I do. Less than 50% sure my father really knows what I actually do. He knows it's something healthcare related, but I just try to explain it as if you sell your house, I'm the real estate broker. Okay.
Oh
You
my
tell your
God,
house.
that is a
I
grossly
mean, but that's
underestimated.
the only way. That's the way you got to
Yeah.
describe it. Yeah. I mean, obviously they're very proud of me. I mean, we grew up, we weren't poor or anything like lower, we were like lower middle class. And obviously I've been able to do some things through my career. And that's why I think I'm so grateful because, I had no idea what I was going to do, in high school. 4 generations of my father's family all worked at the same gas station before me. And then, a lot of, my brother's a firefighter. So still a family that's full of, very blue collar, hardworking people. But I've been very proud of, what I've been able to do at Provident. And I certainly wouldn't be able to have done that without people like Jake and the Jakes that came before him that, help lift me up, in these deal teams to get these deals done. It's a good group because it can be a little cutthroat in investment banking. Most people are just worried about their deal. I think I would tell you, and I can give you examples just from today, just looking at my emails of examples of very selfless people who will go out of their way when an issue comes up on a deal that has nothing to do with them, has no economic benefit for them, to go out of their way, make a couple phone calls, help us with some ideas, help us with solutions. And I've only worked at one firm, so I can't say that this is, unique, but I get the sense in, talking with other people that it is a little bit unique versus, the cutthroat approach maybe other investment banks have where it's just like, I need to focus on my stuff and everything else be damned.
Totally get it. I mean, Kevin came in yesterday. We had the firm came out. We had a nice happy hour together where we thanked him for what he's done over the years, and had a great time. And then we went to dinner. At dinner, we do these things called, dinners with purpose. And we talk about something a little bit deeper than the weather or sports or whatever and get to know each other much deeper. Kevin participated, as most of our executive teams do, in a Enneagram personality assessment discovery process with our head of talent at Rallyday.
Yeah, you guys are putting me through it. So,
Oh gosh, that was a gift, man. He also spent a couple hours with our guys who do a lot of healthcare stuff and, gave them a double, triple click on some of the things we've talked about in this podcast. And I just got to tell you, I mean, it's so cool to get to know you in these different ways. And, if we can do anything at Rallyday that we're proud of, it's just elevating our whole industry for founders, in our case. But there's a very aggressive acknowledgement that we can't do what we do without groups like Provident and Kevin in particular. So I do want to thank you, Kevin, for investing in this relationship and just, I want you to know how much we admire you, how much we admire the firm, and really excited about the future. Thank you for leaning in with us the last couple of days.
yeah, this has been great, Ryan. This is, I mean, obviously we talked about how long I've been doing this. This is my first experience with something like this. There's obviously other, firms that will do banker outings or special types of events, but this is has much more of a personal touch. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little nervous going into it because I wasn't familiar with the Enneagram test and
For example.
and having those dinners where people, whip out a pack of cards and they're like, all right, everybody's going to talk about their feelings or something. You get a little nervous, but I will tell you, and I told this to Jake because Jake was very curious, like, how's things going? And I was like, you know what?
What the hell are you doing, Kevin?
I mean, I will tell you, Ryan, you guys, everybody I met has been awesome. You guys are great people. This has been a wonderful experience for myself personally, professionally, something I've really never had the chance to do. I appreciate the personal touch. And I will tell folks right now, Rallyday, the deal we closed with them last year, and I am no bullshit on this at all, was probably the most competitive deal I have worked on in at least the last, I'll say 5 years, but probably longer. It was incredibly, incredibly competitive. And you guys know why. We had a wonderful CEO in that deal. And that deal went through 3 or 4 rounds of bids. It went through layers and layers of reverse diligence, cut downs, and Rallyday stood out at the end of the day. And I told you guys this last night, and I swear to God, this is the truth. we came back to you guys, gave you the chance to clear the deal, clear the market with the purchase price. You guys came back very thoughtfully and said, we can't get there. Here's what we can do. This is kind of our best. We love David. We want to be his partner. We weren't really sure where David would lean because we knew he could probably get a decent amount more on that deal. But to his credit, and this speaks so incredibly highly of Rallyday, he called us back. I think he spent the night in thought and came back to us. I think it was a weekend in the morning. I want to say it was like a Saturday or a Sunday. And he called me and he called Jake. He says, guys, I appreciate the fact that we could go back to the other group, but this is where I want to have my home for the next 5 years. And it's not easy to do. You guys truly, truly showed a differentiated, thoughtful, founder-friendly approach to attacking deals. And I give you guys so much credit for kind of having such great engagement throughout that process. You were very respectful of our role in that process. Although, we allowed for some personal time with you guys and David. We think it's really important to build that relationship. We can't always be, in the middle of everything, even though we're the middleman. We have to allow relationships to get built. And that relationship you guys built with David over the course of that 3-4 month process from the first time you saw the materials till closing, was incredible. And you guys met every deliverable. And, I got to say, it was not only the best outcome in the process, I was just very, very happy. I'm sincerely happy, especially after kind of seeing how you guys operate and meeting some of the people that weren't even involved in the deal. I'm just very happy we were able to find a home for our client at Rallyday, because he's going to be in great hands. And I will tell you, it's been 6-9 months or so since the deal closed, and it's been off to a wonderful start. He's thrilled with how things have been going with Rallyday. I know the business is doing great. You spend a lot of time with him. That's what he was looking for, and he could not be happier with the decision he's made. And he tells Jake that all the time. So
Yeah. I mean, those words are really, I get emotional about it because Rallyday is, very important to me, not the business outcomes necessarily, but, the product as we think about it and whether we're living up to our standard of excellence for all of our stakeholders, you as an investment bank included, and most especially David and his wife and growing family, and his 2,000-3,000 people that work to varying capacities on a daily basis, and the 600 patients that we provide care for and their families. And it's a huge responsibility that we have in this whole thing. And because of the unique nature of this transaction and the way that you guys did that, our whole team is conscious of showing up every day to earn it. That we are going to earn that which we were given. And I just can't tell you how important that is to us. So thank you for those kinds words. They're not to anyone in particular here, most especially not to me, but it certainly is a compliment to our sense of purpose and why we built the firm for founders by founders. And thank you for saying that, Kevin. And we have had a hell of a good time with David. He is a badass leader, and I can't wait to see what he does over the next 5 years, but look out.
He's a talented dude. And you got to realize too, when you're in healthcare, I don't take this lightly. Not every deal is, super touchy feely. Sometimes you work on kind of deals that are product based and things like that. But most of our deals, especially a deal like elder care, you're taking care of the frail, the old, the sick. Those are good people that run those companies. You think about some of these spaces we work in, especially within David's area of, call it the post-acute care, the home care continuum that includes things like hospice, pediatric home health care. You're taking care of some very sick people, the sickest of the sick in some instances. And they're usually people that, while they might be good business people, they're usually just generally speaking, very good people. And I have found that to be completely true in our best relationships and experiences, and people we've worked with, at least in my career, are people within David's world of that broader speaking world of home care services.
Well, I think that's a drop the mic. I want to thank you and your firm and your senior leaders at Provident Healthcare Partners, all the way down to your analysts. You guys are elevating the industry with us and for those patients and teams that you're talking about. So thank you for the work you have done, and I'm grateful for the relationship, and I hope we have many, many years ahead of us, Kevin. I've loved every minute of it. Thanks for being you.
All right, Ryan. I appreciate it, man. Really appreciate all your time.
Take care. Bye.
Take care.